It is human nature to sometimes put yourself and your own needs first. Indeed, on occasion, it is healthy to do so. But we are all too aware that some people take this too far. We consider such people as selfish and ignorant of the needs of others. But today's tawdry tale is of a man who took this trait to extreme levels of self-gratification and greed, and who, along with his cohorts and an unwitting lady befriended by our nauseating narcissist, killed an entire family purely for financial gain. This is Murder of Crows. By 2003, Kenneth Regan was a fully fledged arsehole, and it would please me no end to tell you why. It'll please me far less to tell you what he would go on to do in 2003, but it is nonetheless part of Regan's story. But before we get to those events, let's look back on the dubious achievements of the career criminal Kenneth Regan. In the 1980s, Regan had become a big player in the drug smuggling game, and through his heroin pipeline he made millions and had no hesitation in showing off his financial stature with expensive jewellery and fancy Mercedes sports cars. The key to his nasty empire was a freight company he had invested in and was using as a front for the smuggling operations and also for money laundering. With false passports and an arrogant attitude, he believed he was untouchable, mixing with some of Europe's top villains. At this time, he was living the high life, and in fact had earned the nickname Captain Cash due to his tendency to keep stacks of money in the boot of his Mercedes. What a dickhead. At around this time, he was honing his skills as a liar and manipulator. When he could not sell a plot of land that he owned to a house builder due to planning permission for the site not being granted by the local council, Regan surreptitiously moved a group from the travelling community onto the site. Regan told the council that if planning permission was granted, he could find a way to move the travellers on. Obviously, Regan got his planning permission. In 1997, he became friendly with a socialite called Belinda Bruin, who was at one time the best friend of Paula Yates, who was the ex-wife of Sir Bob Geldof. And he pretty much love-bombed her with expensive gifts. Why am I telling you this? Because it will become critically important later in our tale of arseholeness. But for Regan, around that time, the wheels came off in 1998, and he showed his true colours and the extent of his self-serving and selfish nature. Not one to do things by half, he was caught with wads of cash in his car and, the small matter of 25 kilograms of top grade heroin. This meant that as a bare minimum, he should have been looking at 14 years in prison, and likely much longer, given the very large amount of heroin that he was carrying. So at this stage, he just nods and says, yeah, it's a fair cop, I'll just do me time. No, 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 no. Like a good snaky bastard, he says, can we make a deal? And so becomes a supergrass. Not these guys. I wouldn't want them associated with this cockwomble, but he becomes a snivelling sycophant, doing all that he could to ensure the best outcome for himself. Let me tell you about some of the police operations he had a major hand in. So when our main arsehole turned big mouth and all chummy with the police, he turned to, in the opinion of villains everywhere, the dark side. He first turned during Operation Bromley, where he spilled his guts about the whole smuggling operation he was involved in, dropping his gang members in the shit. Next, he became involved in Operation Hoy, where he threw a number of his criminal associates under the bus, and these included a ne'er-do-well called Bill Hornsey. Now take note of that name, because it will come up again in a little while. In Operation Extend, he gave evidence in a cocaine trial, and in Operation Parisienne, he was key in solving the on-street murder of businessman Donald Urquhart. Jesus Christ, who names these operations? Do you think they just randomly open a dictionary, then close their eyes and poke a word? But anyway, the upshot of all his mouthing off was only serving 4 years of an 8-year plus sentence, and he was released from prison in 2002. I would say that Regan returned to business as usual at this stage, but his money and criminal infrastructure were now gone, and Regan had to go back to basics. Do not pass go, do not collect £200. He was reduced to sharing a home in Wiltshire with his dad and driving a second-hand Peugeot. Where's your Mercedes now, Kenny? But the pull of earning money from underhanded means was never far away for Regan. and he was soon plotting his next scheme. It was around this time that he reacquainted himself with Belinda Bruin, who had left London and was now living in a farmhouse, a great Colford house at Studley, which was near Tiverton in Devon, and which stood on 50 acres of land. I genuinely believe that this, at least initially, was due to him actually having feelings for her. But in Regan's world, where truth is a scarce commodity and everyone can be used, this would change with his next scheme. But it would be a scheme where the ruthless Regan would go to the ultimate ends to sate his greed and desire for money and power. Regan was again love-bombing Bruin and was offering to do landscaping work at her farmhouse estate with a view to impressing her and hoping their friendship could become something more. Now, Regan became interested in some land near Heathrow Airport. This land was reportedly worth around £3 million, and there was a businessman called Amajit Chohan who had an existing option to buy the land. And Regan sees an opportunity to insert himself into the deal to try to get some of that lovely money. Unfortunately, that deal does not happen for whatever reason. But during this process, Regan has built up a decent relationship with Amajit Chohan. And when he finds out that Chohan has made his name and fortune through running a transport company called Seba Freight, a light bulb goes off in Regan's head. If you remember, when Regan was a drug lord, he used a freight company as a front for smuggling and money laundering operations. So once again he set his mind on acquiring another transport company that he could use in exactly the same way. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. It worked last time, let's see if it'll work this time. But this time he had no money to buy into a company or buy one outright, so he would have to get one by other means. During his dealings with Chohan, he knew that the businessman was thinking of selling up and enjoying something of a retirement with his family. He had two young sons, Ravinder, who was 18 months old, and Devinder, who was just 8 weeks old, with his wife Nancy, and they lived extremely comfortably in Hounslow, along with Nancy's mother, Charanjit Kaur, who was helping with raising the children. But Chohan's success in business meant that he had not spent as much time with his family as he would have liked. So he was thinking of slowing down and taking some time out, and was looking into potential buyers for Seba Freight. Regan decided to take advantage of all the knowledge that he had by posing as an intermediary for a Dutch buyer with a serious interest in acquiring Chohan's company. But Regan knew that he could not accomplish such a major undertaking on his own. And what happened next is testament to Regan's skills as a charmer and manipulator. He actually recruited two men that he had given evidence against previously, Peter Rhys and Bill Hornsey. Evidently there is still honour amongst thieves, just not for Regan. Regan then lured Chohan to a meeting near Stonehenge on the 13th of February 2003. And it was there that Chohan was drugged with GHB and was held hostage for several days. He was tortured and made to sign numerous documents transferring the company to Regan. He was told that his family would be harmed or killed if he did not comply. He also made Chohan sign several other blank pieces of paper that could be used for additional documents later if this proved necessary. Then, leaving Rhys to watch over Chohan on the 15th of February, Regan then went to Chohan's Hounslow home, and through his dealings and relationship with Chohan, he was able to talk his way into the family home, where the family were by now growing increasingly concerned that Chohan had not returned from his meeting. Regan and Hornsey then killed Nancy, her mother Charanjit, and the two young boys, Ravinder and Devinder, before callously loading them into a van as if they were rubbish. And the van is then driven to the southwest of the UK. On the 16th of February, the men are pretty sure by now that Chohan has served his purpose. And with his family killed, and with Chohan having no doubt as to who would have killed them, there's no way that he can be released. But they still need Chohan to make a few phone calls to tie things up. It's extremely likely that Chohan knows at this point that his remaining time is short. But in an incredible act of bravery, foresight, and an unwillingness to allow his ordeal to mean nothing, he manages to secrete away a letter he finds that is addressed to Regan at his father's address. He then manages to fold the letter up small enough to tuck into his sock. The men murdered Chohan later that night and trussed him up in brown packing tape that they had taken from Seba Freight specifically for this purpose. So Regan now had 5 bodies on his hands. But as luck would have it, he knew of a very large property where he was already doing some landscaping work that would have ample room to hide a few corpses. Belinda Bruin's farmhouse estate. The bodies of the Chohan family were taken to that property, and buried under 48 tons of gravel on the driveway. But Regan had more in store for Belinda Bruin than just using her driveway as an impromptu cemetery. He also wanted her to become the legitimate face of Seba Freight, so that it could, at least on face value, seem like just another freight company. And in the days that followed the murders, he installed her as chief executive, in a purely symbolic way, as a front to hide his illicit activities behind. But his decision in making Bruin so visible within the scheme would eventually come back to bite Regan on his very evil arse. Meanwhile, Regan had not reckoned on the close family ties of Amajit Chohan's wife Nancy. Nancy had a brother called Onka Verma who was living in New Zealand, and he was growing increasingly concerned since he was in very regular contact with his sister and his mother Charanjit, and he hadn't heard from them for a few days, which was extremely odd and out of character. He spoke to the police and was growing more and more frustrated at what he saw as a lack of action from them, indicating they were not taking things as seriously as he was. On the 5th of March, about 2.5 weeks after the murders, Onka Verma flies halfway around the world from New Zealand to England to pressure the police in person to take more action. Now this proves pivotal, as the case is soon referred to Scotland Yard's Serious Crime Squad, and an in-depth investigation is launched. Regan is interviewed for the first time on the 21st of March and is getting increasingly paranoid. Given his own checkered past and the installation of Belinda Bruin, who had no previous executive experience in running a company, surely it's only a matter of time before the police start investigating Bruin's farm estate, and the property is extensively searched. By the 19th of April, Regan can't wait any longer, so he, along with Hornsey and Rhys, take on the chilling and nauseating task of digging up the bodies and moving them elsewhere. By this point, Regan had bought a boat, so the next day the three men take a very lovely day trip, take the bodies out and dump them at sea in the English Channel. Then Regan does something stupid, quelle surprise. He decides to wind the police up. He creates a fictional meeting between Chohan and some businessmen, including himself, at Newport in South Wales. But Chohan nor any of the other businessmen show up. In a brazen attempt to mock the police, the meeting was to have taken place at the monument of a bronze pig, with pig being British slang for a police officer. But the next day, Amajit Chohan does turn up, floating in the sea near Bournemouth appear. And lest we forget, he has secreted evidence in his sock. If it has survived the post-mortem shenanigans of burial under rubble and time submerged in the sea. The discovery of his body, however, pushes the police to accelerate the investigation, and so to start interviewing Belinda Bruin. So with the net now closing in, Rhys flees to a friend's home in Gloucestershire, while Regan and Hornsey flee to Europe. The farm in Devon is excavated, and DNA from the Chohan family is found. At Chohan's post-mortem, the letter in his sock is found intact, and it implicates Regan, solidifying the case against him. So with some of his last actions, Amajit Chohan has nailed Regan's balls to the wall and ensured justice for his family. But that would come later. For now, he and his cohorts were on the run. Rhys was arrested in Coleford, in the Forest of Dean in May, but the other two remained at large. Nancy Chohan's body is discovered by fishermen near the Isle of Wight in July, while her mother's body washes up on the Isle of Wight 2 months later. The bodies of Devinder and Ravinder have never been found. Ravinder was just 18 months old, while Devinder was only 8 weeks old. Regan is ultimately arrested in the city of Ghent in Belgium, having run out of money, while Hornsey, growing tired of living in a state of constant paranoia, surrenders to police in Dover. The trial that followed at the Old Bailey in London was the longest at that time to have involved the Metropolitan Police, and was thought to have cost in excess of £10 million. But ultimately, justice was done, and Regan and Hornsey, given the horrific nature of their crimes, were given whole life orders. Rhys was cleared of 4 of the murders, but was still convicted for Amrit Chohan's murder, as well as assisting an offender, and was required to serve a minimum of 23 years in prison. Belinda Bruin, as a pure patsy and oblivious to the crimes happening around her, was never charged with any crime. Speaking at the end of the trial, the judge, Sir Stephen Mitchell, said, "Your crimes are uniquely terrible. The cold-blooded murders of an 8-week-old baby and an 18-month-old toddler, not to mention the murders of their mother, father and grandmother, provide a chilling insight into the utterly perverted standards by which you have lived your lives. Your characters are as despicable as your crimes. Each of you is a practiced, resourceful and manipulative liar." Speaking after the trial, Nancy Chohan's brother Onka Verma, who had pushed the police into action after the disappearance of the Chohan family, said via a spokesman, "The last 2 years have been a living nightmare. The deliberate, premeditated slaughter of my innocent family is akin to me being given a life sentence. A life with no laughter, no happiness, and no joy." So there we have the tragic tale of 3 generations of a family wiped out through pure unmitigated greed. That it was a time when Amajit Chohan was going to be spending more time with his family after working to build up a fortune that could comfortably support them, was all the more upsetting. These men had no hesitation in killing 2 babies, and later rubbed salt into that wound by not revealing what had happened to them. But there were other victims here, including Onka Verma and the extended family of the Chohans, who have to deal with their ongoing grief to this very day. And even Belinda Bruin, the unwitting stooge who was used so cruelly as a pawn in this deadly game. This video is dedicated to the memory of the Chohan family, and also to all of those impacted by this devastatingly shocking crime. Thank you for watching another episode of Murder of Crows. I'm Steve, and I'll see you when I see you.